Good morning, and welcome to Discover the World Through Photography, or for photographs. My name is Stephen G. Taibbi. I'm going to be your guide today. I used to be a television director of photography. That means I was in charge of doing the lighting and doing the shooting, and I've been a photographer my entire life. So let's move on to this already. All right. What we're here to do is we're here to learn what makes a good photograph good, and to learn how to look at one with understanding of what is involved in any particular photograph, whether it is one of your own or one that you see otherwise, like, through magazines or in any other format. Through this, we can discover a whole new approach to looking at photographs and the worlds that are contained within them. And actually also you can translate a lot of what you're going to learn today to paintings. First of all, photography lets us see things we otherwise couldn't. It lets us see places we will never be. For example, we now have photographs of Mars. I know I'll never be there, but I now know what it looks like because of photographs. It freezes time from action to just a certain point in time. For example, we can catch a baseball being caught. We can see a drip midair. So it freezes time, but it also freezes time in the sense that you see things that happened 100 years ago, and there they are. There's those people. They're still there. You can still see what they look like, what they were doing at that time. Photography also lets us recall memories in detail. How many of you ever look at an old photograph of when you were a child in your home, and you can remember, oh, I remember that room, I remember those things. Excuse me. So it does that for us. And it lets us see detail that's not visible to the naked eye, and we see that all the time with photography, especially in freezing action. It wasn't until photography was invented that they understood that horses galloped with all 4 feet off the ground in part of their stride. It was photography that discovered that. Okay, now photography has gone through its greatest changes in the last few years. Before there was digital photography, every previous format of photography was a medium that could be held up and seen with the naked eye without something needed to interpret it. In other words, you take a photograph on your digital camera and you can look at the back of the camera, but you're really having the machine to interpret it for you, because the photograph itself is on the card, is on that little video card. Before that, you always had a piece of film or a plate that you could hold up and just look at the photograph. But you can't do that with digital, not in the format that it's stored in. With film, you had to know exactly what you were going to shoot before you even picked up a camera. So let's say you wanted to, back in the old film days, you wanted to go shooting outdoors, you had to have the film that was meant for shooting outdoors. Otherwise, if you took indoor film, all the colors would be wrong. So photography used to take a great deal more thought. Nowadays, you just pick up a digital camera and shoot wherever you want to shoot, and it makes up all those decisions for you. Most people think that the advent of digital photography has democratized photography, which means that anybody can shoot now and anybody can be a photographer. And that's true to a degree, but in another sense, it also stacked the deck against others. But what I mean by that is I did a lot of photography when it was film that was published, and I had a very inexpensive camera with very good lenses. As long as your lens was equal to the other guy's lens, you were equal. The photograph, the box that took the photograph, the little camera, all that was doing was opening up a certain amount for a certain amount of time, exposing the film. So anybody's camera, you could have a very expensive camera or an inexpensive camera, and as long as the lenses were equal, you were equal to the person with the very expensive camera. That's not true anymore. Because nowadays, I shoot with a $4,000 camera. If you have a $150 camera, there's no way your photographs can be as good as mine. They can be composed as well, they can be lit as well, but they're not going to have the sharpness that mine are going to have. So while people say it has democratized photography, in a very big sense, it hasn't. And in a very big sense, it's made it that you have to buy expensive equipment if you want to do it professionally or if you want to do it really well. But for the regular person, a $150 camera is fine. But I just want to make that point because It's a little misleading when people say that. Now, digital photography also allows for greater manipulation of the image than was ever possible before. And this goes for motion pictures as well. When you're looking at all the special effects that you see in motion pictures today, that's because of digital photography. As a matter of fact, a lot of the movies you see today are made on digital and then transferred to film. So they're originally made with digital cameras. And you have to be careful with that, because nowadays they can make things look real that are not real. So you have to be careful. Now, the two most important aspects of any photograph is lighting and composition. And this is true of paintings too. And this is true of movies. It's all true of everything that's got an image. Now, the most important thing to remember, at least this is for me, is that everything we see is a reflection. We never actually see the object itself. We just see its reflection. Some of you have probably already thought of that at some point in your life. Others of you probably haven't. But it's an important thing to remember. And it's whenever I remember it, it's really kind of odd that, you know, I'm not seeing this desk. I'm seeing this desk's reflection. And that's true of everything that we see. So lighting is a very, very important part of this process. Light should be used to bring your eyes to the place where the photographer wants to bring them. And here's an example. Now, just as we're going to have a couple of photographs that are older, but because of copyright things, we're going to use my photography because we can just get all the copyrights for this. All right, but if you look down this, photograph and you see how this is. We're going to get into this a little later too, but there are leading edges that take your eye down. But if you notice towards the center, and towards the left side of the screen, it gets brighter, and then it's brightest almost in dead center. Your eye is being drawn to that part. And that's a very good way that lighting is used. Okay. Also, I do want to remember something. I just wanted to say that digital photography is also better for the environment because we're not using the chemicals that we used to use. So that's pretty important too. All right, so lighting can bring depth to an image. Lighting can add mystery or make a photograph flat, not interesting. In portraits, light is used to what we call model the subject's facial features with shadows and light to add interest. If you have completely flat lighting, you have an uninteresting photograph. But if you have some shadow detail on the face or any subject, then that's going to add interest to the photograph or to the painting or whatever it is that you're looking at, even in real life. In good lighting, it's not so much where the light is as much as it is where the shadows are placed. That's a very important distinction. Lighting is much more about where you're putting shadows than it's where you are putting your light. And this is even true when we're doing nature photography. That's why you have to wait for the light to be at the right time. If that's what somebody's doing, if they're doing nature photography, they have to be really certain of the light. And here's an example of that. Now, this is obviously the Grand Canyon. But look at the way the shadows are falling. You see how it's dark, then it's light, then it's dark, then it's light. This is adding depth and interest to the photograph. You'll also notice that it's a pretty cloudy day. And when I'm shooting outdoors, I want to shoot on cloudy days, unless it's going to be sunsets or sunrises. Okay, Photoshop. I don't know how many of you have heard about it, but Photoshop is absolutely a necessity nowadays. Every digital photograph that's taken from any kind of a professional camera must go through Photoshop just to get its basic image correct. If you are using, let's say, a point-and-shoot camera of your own, the camera is making those decisions for you, so it seems like the picture's coming out normal and fine. But in reality, the camera is doing all sorts of stuff inside making decisions on that picture on all sorts of technical issues that you really don't need to get into, but your camera is doing all that for you. Otherwise, you need a program like Photoshop. Now, the thing about Photoshop is that you can take things and move them around. You can take a person and take them from one place in the photograph and move them to another place in the photograph. You can change features. You can do, if you can think of it, you can do it in Photoshop. Now, a lot of people say, well, isn't that cheating? Well, let's talk about that. If you see a painter and they're painting in a field and the field is beautiful, and there are trees and clouds, and it's just gorgeous, but there's a water tower out in the middle of the field. Do you think that painter is going to put the water tower in that painting? I don't think so. So is that cheating? So let's look at some of the greats, like Ansel Adams and George Hurrell. Ansel Adams is known for his photography of Yellowstone, his gorgeous, gorgeous photographs of Yellowstone. And George Hurrell is probably the most famous portraiture artist photographer ever. And he's the guy who did all those stunning photographs in the 40s, 30s, and 50s of all the Hollywood stars. We're going to look at an example of those in just a moment. But the thing is that Ansel Adams and George Hurrell both used darkroom techniques. They were masters in the darkroom. And if you think about it, Photoshop is today's darkroom. So if you're going to say Photoshop is cheating, well then Ansel Adams and George Hurrell were cheating too. Now Ansel Adams used to use a technique called dodging and burning, which you can do in Photoshop too, but dodging and burning is letting more light on a paper that you're developing or less light on the paper that you're developing. George Hurrell took it even further because he took it down to which chemicals he was going to use, which paper he was going to use. So, you know, I don't think that's cheating either. We've got gorgeous images because these people did that. Like anything, Photoshop can be used well or badly. So let's take a look at Ansel Adams. Now look at that. That is just a spectacular photograph. That's in Yellowstone. And look at the way the play of the light is. Now, seriously, do you think that that's the image he got out of his camera? It's not. That's after he dodged and burned. And look what he's got. What he did by dodging and burning was show really what this looked like. Because really and truly, the camera cannot catch what the eye can. So you have to do things to make it look like the way it looked. And this is a master at work in the darkroom. Here's a famous George Hurrell. Now, if you didn't know who he was before, now you know who he is. He did every famous movie star. But look at the guy. Look at the who is that? Clark Gable, right? Look at Mr. Gable's face. You see the shadows and you see the highlights. All of that was because Hurrell spent time in the darkroom dodging and burning. So those were the Photoshoppers of their day. And here is a modern example of the same thing. See how there's shadowing on the face, there's bright spots on the face, and you notice how with the lighting you're drawn right to the girl's eyes, and that's deliberate. This is another thing you can do with Photoshop. This is a girl named Lindsay, and it's the same girl. Those two girls are one girl. And that was able to be done because of Photoshop. It took two images and married them. And those are the kinds of things you can do with Photoshop. Now, composition is exactly like lighting in that it can make or break a photograph. Like I said, composition and lighting, they're the two most important things in an image. And you're going to see that whether you're looking at a painting or a photograph. The photographer has to decide what he wants to include in his frame in the first place. In other words, when he's looking at the photograph, he's looking at the frame of the photograph. He's looking at the square in his viewfinder, and he or she is looking at that and seeing what they want to include, what they want to exclude. So there might be something coming into the frame that would be disruptive or take your eye away that they don't want to include, so they'll move to make that disappear. And an image has to have a certain set of rules of composition too. Now, a really good artist can break the rules successfully, but 90% of the time the rules hold. And I'm going to show you an example of the rules not working, I mean not being used but still working. Now the first major rule is the rule of thirds, and the second major rule is the rule of odds. But the rule of thirds is probably the most important compositional rule, and we're going to show that. And what you're going to have to do, and I'm going to show you a photograph with and without it, but from now on, do this whenever you're looking at something. Put a bingo grid over the image, whether it's because you want to take the image or it's because you just want to look at the image and see how it works. Remember, what we're trying to do here is to see what the photographer was trying to show us. Now, the rule of thirds is so important that they have found cave paintings in France that use the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds is actually just the way the human eye likes to see things. If you see a photograph that's really out of the rule of thirds, 90% of the time, and even more, it's a bad photograph. And the photography might be good, but it's a disturbing shot to see because everything's out of place. Now there's our grid. That's our bingo grid. And you see at the intersections, just look at this grid by itself. You see the intersections, your eyes are drawn to the intersections. And those are the natural places that your eye is drawn in a photograph without those grids. So here's a photograph without the grid. Here's the photograph with the grid. Now you notice the top third line, her shoulder and her right and her left eye, the one by her hand, is on that grid, is on that line. A good photograph is always going to have the eye, one of the eyes, near an intersection. It doesn't have to be exact. It just has to be near it. Now look at the next line down. So notice how it's going right across the pillow. That's a rule of thirds thing. And then if we're going vertical, again, that's the intersection for her eye. And then the other one, that's the intersection for her shoulder with the pillow. And that's a very balanced rule of thirds shot. So here's the shot without the rule of thirds. Here's the shot with the rule of thirds. Now you can just take this grid and apply it to any image you want to look at. Anything. I'm sure there's artwork, photographs where you are now. Just take a look around you and you'll see the rule of thirds is at work. Now put that bingo grid over this photograph. I took this in the Canary Islands. I thought this was pretty interesting. Two neighbors talking to each other. They were about 5 stories above me. But you see the awning at the bottom, at the left part of the photograph. That's the start of the third. Go across with that, and then notice that she is leaning. She's in an intersection of the rule of thirds. So you see. By the way, not every intersection has to have something, but one does. So that just shows you rule of thirds there. And this is a very good rule of thirds shot. You can see the roof on the left goes across and meets the roof on the right where the bird is. So you then look at where the shore is, and that's almost exactly rule of thirds. And then look, the buildings are each rule of thirds. See, and that composition is a very calming photograph because everything is where the eye wants to see it. Now the rule of odds is, and this is a shot that's breaking the rule of odds. Like, let's say you're looking at a photograph and it's a building with columns in this. You have a building and you're looking at it with columns. You're never going to see 4 columns or 6 columns or 2 columns. You're always going to see 3 or 5 or 7 because you need that center column. So if you have 3 columns, one's in the center. If you have 4, there's nothing in the center, and it's kind of disturbing. You're always doing this. So where's the balance? Where's the balance? Now this has only 2 things. These 2 cranes break the rule of thirds, but they break the rule of thirds okay because the way it's off-centered, and that there's more on the left. It's darker on more on the right. It's darker on the left, and it's brighter on the right. It gives the photograph balance, right? And there's only 2 objects, but for some reason, and if you want to count the street lamps, there's 4 objects. This shot breaks the rule of thirds completely, yet it works. So that's what you have to understand is you can break the rules. It's not written in stone, but most of the times it's the way that it has to be done. Now, more in composition is depth of field, or DOF. Depth of field means that you're going to see depth of field mostly in portraiture where it's shallow, meaning where it's in focus can be a very narrow band. In some photographs, sometimes the only thing that's going to be in focus is the eye, and then it goes. If the depth of field is shallow enough, even the face is going to be slightly out of focus. But most times you're taking a portrait, the face is going to be in focus, and everything behind it won't be. And you want that because this way the photograph has more interest for the subject. You don't want to see the background, you want to see the subject. So you use a shallow depth of field. Point of view is really where it means, what is the point of view of the camera? Is it down low? Is it at eye level? Is it high? Is it to the right, to the left of the subject? Sorry about that. That is point of view. Now, why do all of your photographs look the same? Because you're always taking them from standing up. Most people do that. They're always taking their photographs standing up. They can never understand why all their family photographs don't look great. That's because you're taking it from your eye level. You're taking all of your photographs from your eye level. And that is going to give you a single point of view. At the next family function, if you're going to have somebody take a group photograph, have somebody stand on a chair to take the photograph and see the difference that'll make. Okay, here's a picture of my dog Stella and my beautiful wife Rose. Stella is a rescue, and some people would say Rose rescued me. And you notice that the background behind Stella is all out of focus. And you notice even Stella's face past her muzzle is out of focus, because my real subject here is Rose. But Stella's really in there. But you don't even notice that Stella's slightly out of focus, because the depth of field is shallow. But you don't even really notice it because you see Rose's eyes are in focus, and because the whole center of the photograph grabs your attention. But you see how the background is out of focus. That's a shallow depth of field. This is a very deep depth of field shot. Sometimes they call this deep space. They've been calling that in film, meaning motion picture film, since the 30s, deep space. You'll notice that the foreground right in front of the camera is completely in focus, as is, notice how all the lines seem to converge to the bow of that boat. It all comes literally to a point, the point of the boat. This is a deep depth of field, but it also shows you a different point of view. This photograph was taken with the camera on the deck that's in front of it. It was literally on the deck. I had to set the camera on the deck, and I had to put a rock under its lens to get it to the right height. And I put the timer on, because I couldn't touch it at this point, so that it would take the picture, without my touching it and moving it. But so that low point of view made this shot what it is. If I was standing up, it would be a blah shot. Now, everybody knows what this is. This is Stonehenge. But nobody ever sees this. Now, this is a different example of point of view. Point of view could just be that you're looking at a subject in a different way. So everybody sees the Stonehenge. We've all seen that a million times, that same shot of Stonehenge from the front. You see the whole thing, the circle, blah, everybody sees it. I didn't want to take that shot. I wanted a different point of view. So I went to the side, and I took this shot. Now, you'll notice that this is also a deep focus shot. You could see all the way in the background to the horizon is in focus. And that was deliberate. I wanted it to have this depth. And that's what it has. If you look through the left two columns, look through that. Notice how it goes back almost into a V, into a point. And it's all in focus. So this is an example of a different point of view of a subject. Now, if you're going to travel and you're going to take a camera, you have a couple of decisions to make. And, sometimes you go to a place that's really nice, and it doesn't mean you have to be in Europe or anything like that. You could be going to a park. It doesn't matter. But you have to make the decision of, am I going to take a snapshot, or am I going to take a photograph? I'm going to make an image. There's nothing wrong with snapshots. God knows I take plenty of them. Because, sometimes you just want to take that shot with your wife or your friend in front of something. Actually, I don't like having any of those taken of me, but my wife insists on having one of her just to stand in front of whatever it is where we are. But so that's a snapshot. Or, you just take a quick shot of something, and again, that's a snapshot. By the way, the term snapshot comes from archery, and it used to mean when you were retreating from a foe, and you would turn around on your horse real quickly, take a shot. That was a snapshot. Okay, people also thought that it was from the days of duck hunting, where you suddenly raised your gun real fast and took the shot, and that was called a snapshot. But the bow and arrow preceded that. Now, if you're going to be taking, if you want to take not a photograph but make an image, take a really special image of where you are, Then if you can, you have to control the time of day that you shoot the shot. Like I said, lighting is everything. If you're going to take the photograph at 12 o'clock at noon, it's going to be a harsh, flat shot, and it's not really very difficult to get around that. So you have to pay attention to the light. Now, there are many times when you're forced to take a shot when it's flat and hot and hard, and because you don't have the time and you're not going to be there. And there are ways around that too. But it's best if you can come back when it's, let's say you see the thing, you're going to be there for a day or two, and you see the spot that you think, well, this would make a really, really nice shot that I'd really like to keep and show people. So pay attention to the light. Maybe it's maybe there could be some clouds that'll get in your way that day, and just enough to block the sun, and that's enough to filter the sun so that it's not as harsh. A cloudy day is better. Sunsets and sunrise are fine, and they offer the best lighting. Okay, sunset. I took that in the middle of the Atlantic. That's my favorite sunset shot I've ever taken. I took that about 6 months ago. This is the Roman skyline. It was pouring. That made me happy because the clouds, even though this shot was taken at around noon, look at all the detail you can see. It's not a flat shot by any means. It's a shot with a lot of depth, with a lot of color, with a lot of this is bright, this is dark. It's not flat, and that was possible because it was cloudy and raining, and I got wet. But look at the shot I got. Like I said before, if you can only take a shot in bright day, if there's clouds, see if you can wait for a cloud to cover the sun. Now, when you're shooting a person outdoors, you want to set the person so that the sun is behind them, not in front of them, behind them. And you have the little flash on your camera. And you use that for something that we call fill flash. And that's so when the sun is behind that, that's a pretty strong source of light. Otherwise, if you have their body is going to be exposed properly, their face is going to be too dark. So you use the pop-up flash on your camera so it'll fill it in. And just let me show you what that. All right, wait, let me go back here. All right. Also, like I said before, you want to walk around the subject for the best angle. So here, I was in Italy 9 years ago, and I took this, and again, it was cloudy. It was the middle of the day, but it was cloudy, so look at what I was able to get. And the shot works in a lot of different ways. See how on the right, the foreground stones are so sharp, and yet there's enough depth of field here that the stones on the left side, the taller ones, they're sharp too. And you can see the rule of thirds really at play here, and the balance works because you have all this weight on the left, but this little building in the front on the right has so much weight that the whole thing is still in balance. And those are the kind of things you want to pay attention to. Now here's my friend John. We were on his boat. My point of view is I was sitting. The sun is behind him. You can't really see it, but like this, the sun shadow is here on him. Okay, there's a sun shadow going here. So the sun is behind him to my left, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is a perfect fill shot. So I had a camera that had a flash. I popped the flash up, and I took the shot. And it's one of my favorite shots, and it would not have worked if I didn't pop up the flash. Everybody knows this building. This is the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It was raining. I took this last year. I took this about 6-7 months ago. I like this shot in particular because I've never seen this view of the Leaning Tower of Pisa before. Every time I've ever seen the shot, it's been because you get to see the entire tower, and you get to see that it's leaning. Well, I already knew it was leaning. I just wanted to look at something different. So, like I said, it was raining. It was really cold, and I walked up to the building, and I noticed that, look at the way the sun was behind the building and coming through those clouds, and look at the way the sun was almost as if it was holding it. See how the clouds are whiter right behind the building? It's almost like it's got a glow or like it's being held. And I just loved that point of view, so I took that shot. But again, that was a cloudy day. Okay, so let's look at some other photos and see how these rules apply, whether you want to just take a shot or you want to just understand and appreciate the photographs for the pleasure of it. Sometimes, and I love to do this, you can get lost in a photograph. You can so enjoy the photograph, you can just get lost in it. So let's enjoy the journey of where we can go with these photographs and take a look at what the photographer wanted you to see. This shot was taken at 9:30 at night. It was dark. My camera is very good at seeing in the dark. All the illuminations, because, you know, I mean, all the boats in the middle of the harbor, I couldn't see them with my bare eye, but my camera could see them, and I knew that my camera would be able to see them. So I took this shot. This shot was a 3-second exposure. That's a very long time. I had to use a tripod, but this is the result. But you notice how in the rules of composition, see how the deck, the leading lines of the deck take you through, right? And then you make a circle. It kind of takes you into as a big circle, which is what I wanted. This is another perfect rule of third shot. And this was taken out in Wisconsin some years ago, near my sister's house. And I just fell in love with this field. And I just had to take it. But as you can see, it was pretty clear. But I waited till one of those clouds covered the sun, and that's why it's not harsh looking. Otherwise, it just would have been too harsh. But you'll also notice that the photograph is completely balanced. Like if you put it on a seesaw, it's balanced, right? And you see how the green area in the lower left is balanced by the area in the upper right. The area in the upper left is balanced by the area in the lower right. See, the big dark tree is balanced out by the white gate. Those are the kinds of things that I position myself to get that balance. And look at how deep the shot is. It's another shot with deep focus. Now, this I took in Florence. And, you know, a lot of times when people go on trips, they take pictures of buildings. I've just showed you several. But a lot of times the thing that makes the trip are the people. Now, this was a vendor who was in one of the squares in Florence, not St. Mark's. She was in La Croce Square, Square of the Cross. And she was a vendor. It was raining. And she was cold. And I looked at this woman, I said, this woman has a hard life. She's standing out in the freezing cold, selling her little purses and things. And I asked her if I could take a picture of her, and this is what I got. And I think her eyes tell an amazing story. And when I look at her, I remember Florence way more than I do of any of the buildings that I took of Florence. This is a pond in Oyster Bay. And I love this shot because I get lost in this shot. And you see we have leading edges taking us down. You see it goes a little like center, darker spot in the middle, then there's light at the top, and all the reflections in the water. It's just a very calming shot. And this is one of my all-time favorite shots. I took this last year, obviously before they finished building that tower. And I just call this photograph Hope, and I just think that the way the light is and the way the skyline was, that when I saw it, it just spoke to me, and I had to take the shot. Believe it or not, I only took 2 frames of this shot, and this is one of them. All right, so that's my presentation for you today, and I thank you. And now I'm open for any questions, if any of you have questions. We have to do some technical stuff for me to ask you for me to hear your questions. Hello, Armonk. You have a question? Hello, Armonk. You have a question?
No, thank you.
East Northport. Is there a question?
Yay or nay, guys? No, thank you.
Okay. Limbrook, is there a question?
Yes, we have a question. One of the residents would like to know what's the name of the camera you used?
For which shot?
For all of your shots then.
I probably 3 different cameras that these photographs span some time. The photograph of my friend in the boat, that was a Canon G1X. It's kind of a higher end point and shoot, but it's a big camera. It's not really even a point and shoot, but it's not a real expensive camera. Almost all the other photographs were taken with my Canon 5D3 Mark III, and I'm almost always using what they call an L series lens, and that's the lens that I was using in almost all of those shots was a 24 millimeters wide to 105 millimeters wide. It was a zoom. Massapequa.
Hi, we have actually like 3 questions from our residents.
Okay.
Okay. One is, most of your pictures were in color besides the one of the bridge in black and white. Was there a reason for that?
For what? For making the bridge in black and white?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it looked better. I just I had the picture. I took the picture in color. By the way, I always take color because you could change it into black and white later. Although I just bought a new camera where I shoot black and white with that camera a lot just because the black and white on it is so beautiful. But I always shoot color, and then if I think it looks better, I'll go to black and white. But I've been a guy who shoots color his whole life, except for in the early days. But I just like color, so that's why I shoot in color most of the time. But once in a while, there'll be a picture that just screams, I need to be in black and white. What's the next question?
Okay, the next question
I'm
is
sorry,
who
did that answer the question?
Yes,
Okay.
yes it did, thank you. The next question is, who and when was photography invented?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know the answer to that. I'm sorry? Oh, the daguerreotype, I was just being told. And yes, a long time ago. It's in the 1800s.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And they didn't use film.
Okay, last question is, have you any good tips how we can maintain its essence longer?
You mean preserve the image?
Yes.
Okay, well digital is will last a long time. A print lasts a long time. If you use the right paper nowadays and you want to print something, there are papers right now that are guaranteeing 100-year prints, that they'll last 100 years. The thing about keeping the image on a digital format is that's going to continually change. I mean, it's changed several times already. So if you want to really preserve an image, I would get it on good paper with good ink. You need good ink and good paper, and then if you do that, it will last 100 years. Okay, and there was a third question? Was that the third question? Woodcliff Lake?
No, we don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. North Hills?
Yes, our question is, are there still dark rooms? Do people ever use old-fashioned photography like that anymore?
That is such a great question. Yes, they do, but it's rare. And it's rare because it's extremely expensive now. It costs, if you're shooting film, you get 36 shots on a roll. If you're shooting digital, I have cards that will shoot 4,000 shots on a roll. The paper, the chemicals, they're now extremely expensive. It costs $7 to take a shot in film today. So it's very rare, but there are some people still do it. What? Westbury, is there any questions? Westbury, is there any questions?
Not here, thank you.
White Plains? Any questions?
I'm sorry, did you say White Plains?
Yes.
Great. Yes, we had a question, two questions. How many years have you been doing photography for?
I'm almost embarrassed to say it. 55. I got my first camera when I was 5 years old. Actually, I'm 61, so it's more than that. My father was a well-known photographer, and I've been shooting since I'm 5 years old. I've been shooting with getting printed, getting published, since I'm in my 20s.
Wow. Okay, great. Thank you. My second question is, in your professional opinion, what would you consider one of the most iconic or influential photographs of your generation?
Which generation?
Your generation.
My generation? That's a tough one. Boy, there's so it depends. Are you asking about landscape, portrait? There's so many.
I guess it's probably too broad of a question. I don't know. Maybe just.
Okay, I mean, if you're going to look at, let's say a news photograph, that photograph of the Vietnam prisoner being shot in the head, that was that's a pretty iconic photograph. Stieglitz, that photograph of him that he took of the couple in Times Square, when right.
The kiss.
But,
right.
Now here's something that most people don't know about that. That was a staged shot.
Oh wow.
Yeah, isn't that funny? But if you look at the composition of where her hands are and everything, Stieglitz posed them. But
yeah, it looked a little too perfect.
It was really. I was so disappointed when I learned that, but that's a great shot.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you. I appreciate your input.
Oh, and I just got a question from here: is how has digital photography changed journalism? It's done it in several ways. Number one, a still camera can now take video. So a journalist, if he wants to, can take video or take stills, or take a video and get a still out of the video. They're not limited to what a roll of film contains. They can take 4,000, 5,000 shots if they need to on the same card. They can send it electronically, and instead they can take a shot and send it with a sat phone from anywhere in the world. My brother is a reporter, and he does that. And he'll take a shot and just send it on his sat phone back to network, and next thing you know, 5 minutes later, it could be on the air. So I think journalism has changed tremendously from digital photography. But I also think, and we've already seen a couple of examples of this, that people are beginning to doctor quote-unquote journalistic photos, and that's something we all really have to be aware of. That it's very easy to make a photograph look like what you wanted to say by even adding people who weren't there. So, but I think digital photography has changed journalism tremendously. Okay, so that looks like it's the end of the question. So I appreciate you all listening to me. Thank you very much, and all of you have a wonderful day and good shooting.